born in Charlotte, North Carolina, and June the 7th, 1923. As a young boy, around 6 years old, I moved from downtown Charlotte to a farm north of Charlotte at WWII. My father ran a dairy at the time, and I went to school half a year in Charlotte, and the rest of my school days were at WWII, along with 200 other boys my age. We put on a bus and sent to Camp Croft in just over the South Carolina line. And many of the boys that I knew didn't come back after the war. It wasn't a surprise because most boys my age were being drafted. I couldn't have chosen a better chance because I always wanted to fly. And out of the 200 boys that were drafted, one other besides me were put in the Air Corps. Took my basic training at Miami Beach, and minimum heat was 80 degrees, and went from there to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which was 30 below zero the night I got off the train. And they had us stand in line outside and call a roll. And it was so cold that some of the boys lost some fingers before they got us into the barracks. We had to build fires when we got in there. Well, there so many good things and a lot of bad things, but several stand out. The Munich mission in July of 1944 was my worst mission. We were flying at 26,000 feet, and we were nearing the target, and our plane was hit on the right side, right wing, and it knocked a hole in the plane about as big as a bathtub. And we lost gasoline, was flowing out of there all the way past the tailplane, and it eventually caught fire and was burning. So we transferred the fuel from the right wing to the left wing, and it still was burning and couldn't get it to go out. So the pilot decided to dive and blow out the flames. And we dropped from 26,000 feet to 500 feet. And we finally pulled out, and the flame disappeared. But we had over 600 holes in our plane when we got back to the base. We came in, one engine at the time was going out, and we eventually ended up with 1.5 engines, and threw out everything in the plane that we could get loose, and threw it out, even took the doors off the plane and threw them out, threw out our parachutes, anything that we could. We weren't high enough to use a parachute, so we just threw those out too. But threw all of my radio equipment out except my emergency radios, which are used when we got to the English Channel, and the English Channel is about 25 miles across, and the Germans had these 16-inch naval guns that they shot at us all the way back to England. We were coming up on England, and there was the White Cliffs of Dover. We weren't flying high enough to get over that. At least we thought we didn't. But at the last minute, our pilot dipped down to get a little more speed and then pulled back up to get over the edge of the cliff, and we crash landed on a base in England. There wasn't any gasoline left in the engines. Completely empty. But that was one of my worst missions. It wasn't a mission as such, but we flew what we call a shuttle mission that flew from England to Russia. We bombed Germany on the way and landed in Russia and refueled and reloaded with bombs there and flew down to Italy, and we dropped bombs on each leg. And while I was in Italy, we weren't going to be able to get back to England for about a week. And so we were looking for things to do. And it so happened that this pilot on his own was a weatherman and a P-38, which is a twin fuselage fighter plane. And I've always wanted to fly, and he was had taken all of the radio equipment out behind his seat and put in a seat for passenger, and he was selling those trips at $80 per flight. And I asked my pilot if he would loan me the money to go, and he said, yeah, he would. So he said, if you go and get killed, I'm going to have you court-martialed. But anyway, I went out and they checked me out and put me in the back seat of that P-38, and the pilot was a young red-headed Irishman with a twinkle in his eye. And he said, you ever flown in a fighter plane before? I said, no. He said, oh, you'll enjoy this. And so we took off, ran down the runway and went, I thought straight up, but it was pretty much hanging on the propellers. And then when he got near the top, he started turning. The plane was turning, spiraling, and finally he reached the top, and we were I was upside down, and down he came, and he was twisting and turning, and he called me on the intercom and said, "You all right?" I said, "Slow it down." but he didn't. Seasick, but I was close to it then. But we flew from there along the south coast of France, across the Mediterranean to Africa, and back down to Greece, and then back into Italy. And just before we landed, he said, "I want to show you the water." So he flipped over on the back, and we were just hanging there, and he was flying just a few feet off the water. And as we got near Italy, he flipped back over and landed. But that was the most fun time I ever had, and a scary time too. When the war was over, my son and my daughter begged me to write down some of my experiences, and I didn't want to talk about it. Never did want to think about the bad times that we had been through. But as I got older, they convinced me that I should write, and I began writing a little bit each night. My wife was ill, and once I put her to bed, I would write for 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and it took me 25 years to put the book together. And afterwards, I didn't know how I was going to get it published, but my friend Emily Wilson typed the manuscripts for me, and we sent them to New York, and they accepted it. And in all, it cost me $5,000 to print the book. The name of the book is 35 Missions to Hell and Back. It's the story, the history of the 8th Air Force, and I was in the 390th Bomb Group at Framlingham, England. It's the closest base to the English Channel. We were only 8 miles from the Channel. And maybe one of the things that might be interesting to you is that the dangers of flying a bomber. First of all, just getting in the airplane, they crank the engine, and they have a huge fire extinguisher sitting right beside each engine, and as it cranks, they have it ready in case it catches fire, and it did quite often. So that, number one, that's one of the dangers. You're on board with 12 500-pound bombs. When they were loading them, they had to be very careful because any slip and that bomb would fall down on the runway and roll off to the side. And of course, it was not armed, but it's a possibility it would explode. Next would be the terrible weather that is over England. Being so close to the English Channel, it was the fog almost every day, and I mean, it was so thick you couldn't see the control tower. The only way we knew when it was time to take off is they would shoot a red flare, and we'd go fly 3 miles to a radio beacon, make a left turn, fly 3 miles to a radio beacon, and come back to the base in the square. And as we made this trip around, each time we were climbing till we got to flying altitude. And many times when you break out of the clouds, there's thousands of airplanes up there doing the same thing you're doing. And you have to be careful. And everybody had to watch for other planes. And if they saw one up over us as we came through the clouds, we would tell the pilot to drop down, and then we'd start back up again. But there was another one of the things that you had. This is all before you had any fighting at all. So it was a scary time, but a time that we felt was necessary. And we did it without any question. Each man was asked, are you willing to do this? And I only know one man who said no. And they put him on a ground crew. But there's a lot of dangers in flying at altitude, and you're on oxygen. If anything happened to your oxygen mask, you at 13,000 feet, you begin to lose all of your senses. And the planes were not heated, so we had to wear heated suits. And many times an arm wouldn't heat, or a leg wouldn't heat. And or the whole suit would not heat. And we lost some people because of that. So there's many dangers besides just flying dangerous missions. It's one of the main reasons I've decided to publish the book, is to see if we could reach the young people today, to let them know and realize what sacrifices these young men, 18 and 19 years old, were taking for their country. I didn't find anyone that I knew that didn't want to fight and get the thing over with and get the country back to normal. In the meantime, I've made a lot of speeches at different places and at schools where young people in the younger grades, many of them didn't know anything at all about. There's nothing in books today that tell, no history books tell about this kind of stuff and the horrors that went on during World War II.
Children in schools and stuff. What's your main message?
Main message is to listen and pass along the word, how much it means for the young men today to enlist and fight for their country. Well, there's 1,000 things I'd like to tell you, but it take a long time to do it. I would suggest that you read my book because there's a lot of good history in it and a lot of funny things that happen along the way that will sort of ease you for a little bit before you get back into killing. Well, we were flying from England to Russia, and uh, and the ball turret gunner, which is down underneath the plane, it's a terrible position to fly in. You're alone. You got no parachute. You're you can't get out by yourself. You've got to depend on somebody inside the plane. And I flew part of a mission down there, so I knew a lot about it. But the ball turret gunner called up to the pilot and said, "Sir, I've got to go to the bathroom." And it said, well, what it actually said was, "I've got to go pee." Anyway, pilot laughed and said, "Okay, come on out and let Chuck take your place while you're down there." The latrine is such is you go into the bomb bay, and it's a tube that runs, a plastic tube that runs down through the bomb bay, and on the inside of the ship where you go to the bathroom is a funnel. Well, first of all, you've got to get your clothes undone, and there's 4 or 5 different things you've got to get through to get to go. And next of all, you get to disconnect from your oxygen and hook up to a oxygen bottle, which is you carry around in your hand. And so when he got into he disconnects from the intercom, so he didn't have any idea what was going on. So the pilot called and said, "Is he in there yet?" And one of the crew members called back and said, "He's in there." And then the pilot started to maneuver up and down sideways. And here he is with this oxygen bottle in one hand, and trying to hold on to the bomb rack, and he wasn't anywhere close to going to the bathroom. But it was dangerous. It was really dangerous, and it was fun, and we all had a big laugh about it. And so we learned a great lesson: don't ever go to the bathroom when you're flying on the B-17.
My name is Emily Wilson, and Mr. Richardson, Chuck, and I became friends when he actually joined our church, and we sang in the choir together. And I was never really a history buff of any kind. History was just not very interesting to me. And I got interested as he lent me a copy of his book, 35 Missions to Hell and Back. I think at that point it was maybe called a 390th Bomb Group History, or something to that of that nature. And he had originally a handwritten copy that he had done, and then another copy that he typed on an old Corona typewriter, and it was not in a form that was could be digitally reproduced. So I volunteered my services to retype all 446 pages of his book. I did the editing of the book, as Chuck had said. We had submitted it to a publishing company in New York, and so I actually did all of the editing, and there must have been the text editing was very intense. We did probably about 5 edits just on the text of the book. And then the format of the book had to be edited. I think we probably did 3 or 4. That was switching paragraphs from this page to that page, and pages from this page to that. And then we did the cover design and the editing on it. And I did write the editor's note in the book, and it really this book really spoke to me. I, like I said, was not a history buff, so I was not very interested in history until I read this book. And if I could, I'd like to, first of all, read the dedication on this book. He wrote the dedication, and it says, "To all the very young men who flew bombers in World War II, willing to die for their country high in the sky over enemy territory, half a world away from home. And to those at home who loved, supported, and waited for them, many in vain." And the editor's note, like I say, just spoke a lot to me. There's an acknowledgement in here of all the help that we got from, we had a friend at the Parham Airfield Museum in England who provided us with a lot of the information in this book. A lot of it came from the 390th Bomb Group history, but the editor's note says, 20 plus years in the writing, and I'm sorry, I need to put my glasses on for this. 20 plus years in the writing, and for an additional 10 years, this gut-wrenching, heartwarming story has been silently biding its time, awaiting a channel for expression. A compelling story of young boys bound by faith, courage, blood, sweat, and tears, and how that bonding created the brave young men they became. Hopefully, all who read this account will feel the deep emotions of terror, disappointment, frustration, laughter, love, peace, and joy experienced by the author during his service as a radio man gunner on a B-17G during World War II. Stationed in Framingham, England, Mr. Richardson, 8th Air Force, 390th Bomb Group, 571st Squadron, was a recipient of numerous major awards, medals, and commendations, including the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters, 2 presidential citations, the Russian Medal of Victory in the Great Patriotic War on behalf of Russian Premier Boris Yeltsin, certificate in recognition of his contribution and service in liberating France and participation in the invasion of Normandy, signed by French Secretary of Defense Jean-Pierre Masseret, French Liberty of Justice Medal French Legion of Honor Medal. Born on June 7, 1923, Mr. Richardson is the author of 6 additional books of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, and is currently working on a 7th. It was a tremendous honor for me to be able to participate in the production of 35 Missions to Hell and Back. And all credit due to those who served their country during that time. Not absolutely because they had to, but they fought for the freedom of this country, and we all should be indebted to this generation for all of their sacrifice and love of country.